and Force Multiplier team is so excited to have launched our dynamic community filled with networking opportunities, exclusive events with distinguished guest speakers, access to our courses and on-demand training, and so much more. We are looking for a group of founding members to be our very own strategic partners and help us test out the site. In return, we are giving 50% off membership pricing and other lifetime perks. Linked in the show notes, you can get to our community, and don't forget to use the promo code FoundingMember50. Today, we are super excited to host Vice President of Product at a global financial services firm, Randy Mills. Randy shares his non-conventional journey in life and how it shaped him, how his ability to recognize strategic partners helped him accelerate his career, and the impact Force Multipliers have had on his ability to be the leader he is today. His approach to leadership is admirable on all levels, and we thank him for making the time out to be on our show today. Thank you, Randy Mills, for joining our Founder and Force Multiplier podcast. We are so stoked to have you here, me in particular, because Randy and I did cross paths in our careers in the past. So I'm super excited for us to bring all your expertise, your amazing wit, charm, leadership, and I know people are going to be left influenced and inspired after this conversation. To kick us off, I really want the audience to hear about your career journey. We too often in life sort of fall into these societal norms and what's, we're supposed to do at a certain age, and we get beat down and sort of define what success looks like through that. And I know that your journey took a little bit of a different path, and you have found success and diversity in thought, and you've been super transformational throughout your career. So I'm going to hand the baton to you to sort of share your inspiring story.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks, Manal, and really appreciate you having me on here. And thanks for, it took us some time to get this on the schedule with all the travel, but really appreciate it, and really happy for you with the new role too. So
thank you.
Very excited for what you're bringing to this. So a little bit about me, a little bit different, I would say, than most I've actually ran into. Earlier in my career, I actually ended up having a child when I was 20 years of age. And it's great because I'm still somewhat younger, even though he's in his early 20s right now. But at that time, I really had to focus on being able to work, right, and provide, for my family. And so that has been a big part of me for my entire life. Is I realize that if you work hard, it is about that grit. It's not just about working smart. Sometimes it's about the grit too, right? You got to go through tough scenarios, tough situations to find a path forward. It just makes you a better person. And so I actually started off in like a commercial sales, business development type environment. Did that for about a good 10, 11 years. And then later in life, I actually went back to school and got a finance degree. I remembered for this, this business development role I had in manufacturing, where I worked with this controller, and him and I were super close.
Right.
And I was thinking about going back to school, and I was like, hey, do I go for marketing, or, I'm good with numbers. Should I do like a finance degree? And he goes, Randy, you've already got your marketing, degree with your 11 years of sales experience. If you like the numbers, it'll be unique if you're the business development salesperson, but also you have this finance degree, which I went to University of North Texas, just like you. And so so that was my next big step in my journey. So lo and behold, I get this degree. I was very driven, right? It was very purposeful, me going back to school, because number one, I wanted to be able to tell my son, hey, you need to go to school. And then number two, I wanted to better, my life and my career and for the family. And so ended up working in the financial services industry. And that's where, you and I, Manal, we got connected.
Right.
And I started off as a business systems analyst, basically working on different solutions and tools, rewrote policies. It was very heavily around like risk and anti-money laundering and sanctions and compliance and those types of things. And I loved it. I mean, one thing about my journey that I figured out as I've gotten older is I love to learn. I love to learn new things. And so I just found this world fascinating. And then that ended up morphing into more of like a third party oversight type role where, when
Right.
you're working in these financial services or institutions, oftentimes they rely on like other fintech third parties,
Right.
and there's these oversight processes. And so that's where I was able to use some of my relationship management, my commercial type, communication skills, but also package with some of the risk and compliance in there, but really come across partnering with folks. So, whenever you do an oversight type scenario, it's really about, if you find any type of opportunities, how can we work together and let's find a path forward,
Right. Right.
And then fast forward, I come over to now, who I work with now is a larger fintech, and start off in risk and AML and compliance type roles. And then just recently, now I just joined over into the product organization about 10 months
Wow.
ago, where I lead a product organization. And it's fantastic because now I actually get to build solutions, and my teams get to build solutions for things I wished I had when I had these oversight responsibilities in the
That's so
past.
awesome. Yeah.
So to be able to connect all these together, it's really, like, I love it. I kind of pitch myself every day when I wake up. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And if I had to do it all over again, Manal, I would do it the exact same way, because I really feel like I had to learn, through different types of work practices and different types of industries. And just being able to communicate to me
Right.
is probably a big differentiator for me, is that, if you can take a complicated topic and simplify it,
Right.
to where you can explain it to someone at the 30,000 foot level or at the 5,000 foot level or 100 feet level, you're going to get so much more done, which leads to more decision making. And then the team's going to feel more success. So that's kind of, a little bit about me.
I love that. I love a few things. One, I think you're being a little humble, because what people didn't hear is that you shifted industries and did a complete sort of 180, right? Or 360 actually. And you didn't follow that normal path at a younger age. And so you went back to school, but then you shifted from like retail, was it health and health supplements and personal training and all that, like that industry, right? That retail industry, and you shifted completely to financial services. And I will tell you, when I first met you, I thought, first of all, I have never met anybody that loves risk as much as you. So
That's true.
the fact that you had passion about it made me trust you. I was like, oh, you know what? I need Randy to help me on this, partner with me on this project. And then what I also love is that this really brings to light why diversity in thought and backgrounds matters. Because generally, you don't have in a traditional path people who are very much into like third party oversight and risk and so forth. The biggest challenge is being able to take sort of that legality and the regulations and the complex jargon and really help
Yep.
sort of close the gap with the people that are out there every day, the sales teams, the product developers, and the ability to communicate that end to end. I mean, really sets you apart. And I think that's why diverse hires matter. And you sort of, fit that very well and an example of that. And I know you probably don't see it that way, but as a third party and somebody from the outside looking in, that's exactly what you brought to the table. And I feel like that's such a big lesson, right? Like, what do you think?
No, well, I appreciate that, and thank you so much. I do agree. I think that, because of my previous experiences, it did allow me to kind of go in with a different approach, a different angle, right? It's very much my brain very much works in the fact of, how do we move this forward? We're here today. How do we move this here, forward tomorrow?
Right.
And that's whether, you're in a commercial type of environment. Maybe if you're working like in a risk compliance environment, maybe there's like certain new regulations or requirements coming out. So you're trying to figure out how do you move, forward on that to address those. If you're working in a product environment, you're trying to figure out, what's the market problem, right? You're trying to solve for. Do you have product market fit? And then, what's the addressable market you're trying to go after? But it's always about how do you move it forward. And the truth is you can't do that by yourself,
Right.
right? You got to work with your functional partners. You got to work with your teams. And then that's where I feel like what's so important is how do you create an ecosystem within the team that feels not only like empathy, but also too that they can feel trusted and empowered. Like it's okay to make mistakes, right? As long as you can pick yourself back up and learn from it and keep moving forward, make mistakes. That's okay, right? In fact, that's the best learning opportunities that you can have is by doing that. And then also too, the other piece for me that's really important, it's how do you create a leadership type of environment for your team where they don't work for you, you actually work for them. So in other words, I work for my team.
Right.
And every day, my job is to remove obstacles and distractions. And that way they can focus on what they need to focus on to keep moving forward. Right. And so to me, that's kind of, my dynamic, I would say, whether I'm dealing with a customer, whether I'm dealing with like a teammate, or maybe just a general problem in general, is how do we keep moving forward? And a big part of that is communication and just getting people to feel like they're part of something special. And we can make change, right? We really can.
Right. So, on that point, especially in today's environment, because we've been going through a lot of change from a macro, I
Sure.
would say, perspective. In the financial services industry, maybe all of us that grew up in that industry were used to a lot of micro changes as well. and
Oh
now we're
yeah.
sort
Oh
of in
yeah.
a, and now we're in a very pivotal, and you're sort of in that pivot. So we're in this pivotal, I would say, sort of mentality about new age finance, which is now fintech versus traditional, financial services. And you're in the forefront, sort of making these disruptive and evolutionary sort of changes. So tell us a little bit how, as a leader, and you sort of spoke on this, but I want you to dive into it because you are such a great motivational leader. How do you keep your team with you? Because you have very high loyalty with people that work for you. I've seen it throughout your career. And people that have come to me after they've worked with you, they're like, I really loved Randy. I'm like, oh man, he set the bar really high. so kind of share with us, your leadership style, why you feel it keeps your employees motivated, and how you're able to influence them throughout all these drastic changes, because it's a lot of change and it's a lot of macro pressure at a very
Sure.
extensive level, right? I mean, right now you're dealing with, this sort of global inflation. We had the pandemic that just happened, political unrest, like everything impacts your business, especially from a regulatory, anti-money laundering, cybersecurity. I mean, all that stuff. So how do you
Yep.
do it? Like, how do you keep your teams motivated? And today it's so important with the mass exodus and resignation. How? Tell us
Sure.
how. I know leaders want to hear this.
Sure. I think it's, some of the things I just mentioned earlier, which is creating an ecosystem where you can, have your teams feel empowered and that they're protected, right?
Right.
I really feel like those are very two important components of it. And then the other piece that I really focus on a lot is around just your ability to constantly learn and apply new concepts and things, right? So whether you're using, someone like the LinkedIn Learning, for example, or maybe some other tools that are out there today, learning about how can you be a better communicator, right? How can you be more effective at time management?
Right.
How do you do an executive presence, right, for communication?
Yep.
And also, too, it's about learning new areas that are out there. As we know in the fintech space, there's always new and emerging verticals that are coming out there. And so what I would do from time to time is have my teams actually do kind of like a lunch and learn, or like kind of like a knowledge share, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And then if there's a specific topic that they're really focused on, they're like the expert in our group on, then hey, how about you present it to us over the next couple of weeks, right? And we can learn and ask questions. But they feel like they're contributing to something. They feel like it's them that's helping move the ball, so to speak. And I love it, And it actually, that specific meeting was with my old risk team that I had in the past. And it was someone on the team that came up and said, hey, I think we should have this. I'm like, how about if you go lead it? Because I think that's a phenomenal idea.
I love
And to
that.
this day, They still do that meeting, and I still get the meeting invites for it.
Oh,
And when my calendar's free, I'll still join it. But I just love the fact that it happens every few weeks, and then one time it's going to be you, Manal, and you're going to talk about the topic of X, Y, and Z, and then 2, 3 weeks later it's me talking about something else. But you can tell people have a passion for this. So again, it's how do you create an ecosystem where people feel empowered that they're truly contributing to something and they're making a change, right? They're making an impact to something for the better. If you do that and you create it to where your teammates feel like they have the opportunity to learn and grow, and it's okay to make mistakes. Watch out, world. You're going to accomplish some great things because you're going to create something versus the opposite is I'm scared to do something. I'm scared I'm going to fail and I got to be perfect. And guess what? Nobody's perfect.
right.
Right. And so it's just very, and you create this cohesiveness that becomes a very protective team, and they very much look out for one another. And that's something that's what gets me excited. Like that's what every day when I wake up in the morning, I do a couple things. At first, I say I'm grateful for what I have. Number two, I tell myself literally, today's going to be a great day. Like I feel like if you say that first thing in the morning, you believe it. And then just being able to see other teammates, being able to help uplift one another, right? Because sometimes I'm going to fail myself.
Right.
And then when you have a teammate come in behind to help you, it's very satisfying, right? To do that. And then guess what? That multiplies, right?
Right.
Now they're doing it with their teams because I've seen people that I've were on my team in the past where now they are leading their own teams.
Right.
And some of these are global. And, especially during the pandemic, we weren't traveling that much at all. And to make connections, over video conferencing is a little more challenging. But I tell you, the teams that I've been a part of been very special. And, we've all practiced that philosophy.
Though that's awesome, and there's so many great features to take out of there. And I think, and I just talked about that in a previous podcast, but bringing in and really understanding that human aspect of what keeps us motivated and that engagement is so important. I mean, because we all want to
Yep.
be part of something bigger. We all want to make an impact, right? Like we're here, there's a reason we're here, and it's a greater impact than just following the grind day to day. And I feel like us who kind of did the grind learned that lesson the hard way.
Absolutely.
So it's nice that you're bringing a fresh perspective and really bringing all that engagement and really driving the why behind the future with your teams. It's very admirable. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And just one thing I want to add, just got this thought about this is a big part of being able to do that too is being able to understand, where your team or where a specific person contributes to the overall vision. And I like to use the analogy of, if you work on a conveyor belt, right? Let's say we're making a car, right? And there's a person that's putting the steering wheel on, right? That's my one job. I put the steering wheel on. The other person puts on a wheel. The other person puts on the gas and brake pedals, right? But we don't really know what we're making, right? Because we're not at the end assembly line. But if we understood like what kind of car we're making, what kind of color it is, right? Like what's, is it a sports car? Is it a utility vehicle? Whatever the case is, we're going to probably put more into it because we understand what we're
Right.
actually helping build and what we're driving. And I feel like that applies no matter what type of organization or company you work in. If if that individual or that team understands this is why my role is so important and this is why I can make such a big impact, you will see more output, more productivity with them. You'll probably see better morale within the organization. And then at the end of the day, you're going to foster this environment that's going to be so collaborative and very like nurturing and helping one another. And that's where teams win, right?
Right.
Because where teams don't win is that they don't have that and there's breakdown and people are jealous or people are just maybe there's they're trying to go out for one another right on different areas or trying to outdo one another versus hey, let's work together,
Right.
right? Let's
There's
see
a
what we
greater
can bring
good.
together.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And I very much believe that.
Right. I love it. So you mentioned this a little bit, you touched on this, but in your career, you have built very strong relationships, and you've created opportunities for partnerships and strategic partnerships, to drive either certain initiatives. Look, the initiatives that you drove sometimes weren't the most, I would say, sought after, because you're like, okay, reg XXX came down and everybody has to adhere to this. So it's not like shiny and fun sometimes, right? But it's a necessity, especially in our digital age. So, kind of help us with, the lessons and the best practice of how strategic partners played a role in your career and why it was so important for you, or how you approach it.
Sure. Okay, that's a great question. Um, I'm very much, oftentimes when you're working in organizations, you're working with functional partners quite a bit, right? So whether you're working with maybe commercial teams, you're working with go-to-market folks, legal, compliance, whatever the case is. And oftentimes, if something doesn't, go right, it could be because there's a breakdown in communication between those different areas. Okay. Maybe there's SLAs, maybe you're missing timelines, right? Maybe whatever the end piece that you're trying to do is, maybe it's not exactly meeting expectations that you had initially. And so that's where I feel like it's important to make sure that you include these different folks as like stakeholders as part of your process, and they can actually contribute to what is the direction, what is the vision that we're trying to go to, versus having them, reviewing it later and then chiming in, right? If you make teammates and other areas a part of the process from the beginning, then you're inviting true collaboration with folks, and then usually the end product you have is going to be so much better. And you'll find out too, there's less friction, there's less, back and forth, things like that. And then at the end of the day, everybody feels like they're contributing into something that's bigger than them. And then usually you'll drive a better solution, right? Whatever that might be. So that's how I've kind of approached it, is whether I'm doing an update to like a policy document, whether maybe it's some type of new, technology, whatever it is really making sure that you include these groups from the get-go. And then usually you'll have a much satisfying result from that. And to be fair too, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, Randy, have you thought about X, Y, and Z?
Right.
Oh, thank goodness you've done that. At least I find out now versus 3 or 6 months from now. And now we just, maybe we can pivot slightly to address that potential concern.
Yeah, no, that's so important. It's a good pivot actually into, force multipliers, because strong force multipliers, that's what they do for their leaders, is they bring sort of that unified cohesion and help disseminate, that one vision, that ultimate North Star, and really keep, because everybody is really focused in their sort of rail that they're on. And that's just the way it is, right? You're dealing with clients, you're dealing with product breaks, you're dealing with like back end technology. And so for somebody to step back and really help bring sort of all of it together back to what the ultimate goal is not that easy. And I know you have had this experience in the past, and as you're looking for, your next force multiplier, can you share, how a force multiplier has impacted you as a leader in the past, and what do you look for in strong force multipliers?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Good question. I've definitely worked with quite a few in the past, also including yourself, Manal. But I would say that, to me, the force multiplier, they are very much the backbone, right, of whatever team or organization you belong to. And it goes beyond, scheduling and trying to do, assisting whoever that leader is. It is very much being able to understand, all the different players within an organization, understand some of the different functional partners that can really help move things forward. And it is someone that can literally make or break a team, in my opinion. And so usually if you have a strong one, right, not only is the communication skills a really, really important piece, but also to the empathy, obviously, is very, very important. Organization is the skills for organization is very important. But I think the biggest piece is that inside willingness, the drive, right, to make change.
Right.
The knowing that they believe in themselves to make that change
Right.
That is so important, right? Because before you get anybody else to believe in you got to believe in yourself first. And that goes for even these force multipliers because they are empowered, right? They can make some of the big changes. And oftentimes they can help an organization become better and get to a goal quicker because of that. So that's what I've seen. And in terms of, what I like to see in a force multiplier myself is, number one, do they stand for good principles, right? With whatever they're trying to drive for success. Do they have the ability to not get distracted from the noise? There's so much things that can distract us during the day.
Right.
And so being able to hyper focus on what is the task at hand and how do we move this forward, that is super important. And then, of course, just being able to, collaborate, whether it's with internal teammates, whether it's with functional partners, and really drive to a solution. If you can do those three things, it's going to be amazing what you can accomplish.
I love it. I love it. So, Randy, you're so knowledgeable. You, every time I talk to you, there's like, we talk about something new, something you've listened to, something you've read, a new hobby you're taking on. Kind of share that other side of you that people don't see. Like how does Randy become, the Randy Mills?
Well, thank you. I'm very flattered. So I think one is the constant wanting to like learn and grow. As I've gotten older, I realize what makes me happy, okay, as a person, as an
Right.
individual. And a big part of that is if I feel like I'm learning new things and I'm like, that gets me excited. So I think what you're referring to, Manal, is like during the pandemic, for example, I used to travel quite a bit for work. And then all of a sudden with the pandemic, I didn't travel. And
Right.
so I've been, big into photography as a hobby for the past 10 years. Done a couple local shows, like small stuff. And then during the pandemic, I started getting into like, videography, started getting into the drone, got my drone certification because
Wow.
I was bored. And also got
There's a
into
drone certification?
some music production too. Yeah,
I didn't
there
even
is.
know
Yeah, to
that.
do stuff. There is. And so, it's these types of things where, oftentimes, and even my wife, she's been super supportive of this stuff. And she's actually, she's proud of me because of my wanting to like learn and grow and do new things. But yeah, I mean, so now, that actually relaxes me is getting into it and like I get to create something. But
Right.
again, it kind of goes back to, what I mentioned earlier about, building teams and, building teams that make impact is, if you feel like you're creating something, you feel like you're doing something that's making an impact in the world, right? Or you're moving something forward. And when you're doing, some photo editing, and I take a lot of portraits of the kids and my wife and the family
I
and all
love it.
that. But if you're doing that and you're actually doing the editing, or I make some of these videos, right, where I'm going to a Halloween hayride, for example, right, and we're setting up pumpkins, or we're doing like a Christmas video.
From
Um,
cybersecurity to Halloween hayrides.
it's like it's fun to me, and then you see the final product where there's like the music, you're cutting the scenes and all that,
Right.
and that's like my outlet. But and my wife's happy because we got all these great videos of the family from doing that. But
I'm
so for
I'm
me,
gonna give my
that's what
husband your phone number so you can, give some lessons, some tutorials.
that sounds great. That sounds great. And but yeah, so I would say that's what's a little bit different about me and what really gets me you know really gets me excited, to be honest with you. But it also, I really believe this, and I didn't figure this out initially. This just came
Right.
up by accident. But I feel like it works a different part of your brain because I worked in this risk and anti money laundering world for so long, which is very much according to regulation XYZ section 4 dash
Very
B, right? And you're
structured.
trying to help people understand
Yeah.
that, and very structured. You get this like creative side, but then what it helps you with, and I really believe this, is that it helps you tackle complex problems because you're looking at things differently. So, for example, if I'm working on a photograph and I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I change like the saturation? How do
Right.
I change some of the colors, right? The hue, the luminance, all that. I'm looking at how can I make this picture? Maybe the composition's good, but how can I make the end product better, right? And then you can see a difference from the beginning to the last piece of it. But it's the same thing with work. You know, if you're dealing with an operational issue where maybe the workflow has some optimization, maybe there's something new coming down that's going to create a lot of heartburn or friction, for example. So how do you minimize that friction? You're still using these same type of like muscles in your brain that say, okay, here's what the current state is. How do I get to this future state? And to me, that's what I find fascinating, to be honest with
Right.
you, is how does the mind work, and how do
Oh, yeah,
how
for
can you
sure.
get yourself there? How can you
Yeah.
get teams there?
Actually, on this week's Mondays with Manal, I mentioned an article that I read in Harvard Business Review that spoke exactly about that. That we believe that to be a creative, and society sort of has recently also created this label of creatives versus non-creatives. But it talks about how
Hmm.
as we become adults, we lose sort of the that creative side because we are in this, we when we're children, we're all a lot more creative because we don't have this fear or this notion of judgment or will I fail or what will other people think, right? Or there's so much that as we get older we have responsibilities and accountabilities, and we kind of structure ourselves in a very timely manner, and we that over structure kind of creates sort of that loss of that creativity and a part of your mind that actually plays such a big impact in, like you said, decision making, product development, how you manage and lead, how you maybe have inner satisfaction. Because when we also live in a
Hmm.
very structured, mundane world, we also end up, that's why burnout happens, right? And that's why we lose our mojo and we have midlife crises and and so and I'm sure we've learned this lesson after having our midlife crisis, but so it's easier to talk
Right,
about.
exactly.
So share with us, because it's not always an easy path. Is there a moment in your life, or you just were down and things just, there was no silver lining? How did you get out of that, and what advice would you give others that are maybe are in that mode right now?
Sure. I really do believe, and this is like a cliche statement that you've probably people have heard before, but what happens in your life, right, is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
Right.
I very much believe that. And I
You don't
wasn't
see it at
born
that
with that.
time.
Yeah, I didn't at the time, but as I get older, and I've been through a lot of situations where I've been told that I'm going to fail. I've been
Yeah.
told that I'm not going to be successful. I've been told, "What are you thinking, Randy? You had this good thing going over here. What are you trying to do now? Doing this other area." And the truth is that it's got to feed your soul. Like if you feel like, and you touched on this earlier, but as long as I'm feel like I'm learning and I'm growing and I can make an impact, right? And I can help motivate, inspire, right? And lead and see other people take those same principles and then do that themselves with others. That is like the most satisfying thing, in my opinion. And so for me, that's kind of the direction I think about and I go to on a daily basis. And that's what gets me really excited, to be
Yeah.
fair. So if you do that, if you do things that you like, that get you excited, well, guess what? You're going to keep doing them, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so,
And you got to
yeah,
keep trying new things to know what it is. Sometimes it's
yep,
okay to not know. And I think
yep.
that's where we sort of, lose that. I know in my career, and I know you did too, so I feel like this is going to be a great lesson for a lot. But you made a lot of changes, whether it be the industry you're in, whether it be the type of role that you were going for. I did the same thing. I talk about this all the time, the importance of making lateral moves. It's not always about staying in one industry, one maybe line of business, and then getting promoted within there. The
Hmm.
advancement of your mind and the transformation of thyself, when you do shift drastically what you're working on, how you think about things and industries and roles, it makes you who you are, right? Like you did the same thing: sales, marketing, finance, product development, risk. I was, I also was like super finance to strategy to sales to marketing to, I was in product at one point. And,
Hmm.
like it really creates this just different sort of mindset and almost creates intrapreneurs within corporations, right? So kind of share with us how you benefited from it and why others should think about things like that.
Sure. No, that's great. You're right. I mean, being able to go into these different parts of an organization or experiences, right? You think about whether you're dealing with customers directly, right? Or maybe you're more behind the scenes, like maybe more administrative type role, operations behind the scenes. It really gives you an overall perspective in terms of what is your current role and what impact can you make. So kind of back to my conveyor belt, car methodology. If I used to do the driver's light or the steering wheel, and now I'm the person working on putting on the wheels, and then 2 years from now I'm the person putting on the gas and the brake pedals. I'm going to remember, oh, you know what, I might need to put these pedals on a different way, or maybe I should think about, let me put these bolts over here for the steering wheel. You can think about it more holistically, and then guess
Right.
what, the customer experience is probably going to be a little bit better because you have that understanding. But so being able to understand that, right? Like you think about, and this goes back to our earlier discussion, which is you get breakdowns between functional partners,
Right.
right? And so if you have people like you and myself that we've been a part of these different organizations in the past, oftentimes it can be us that can be the catalyst for change and help drive to a sooner, goal or result,
Right.
because we can break down those barriers, right? Those maybe fractured, siloed, type operations and say, hey, listen, so and so, I know why you're asking this because you're looking to achieve X, Y, and Z, but let me help explain what I've experienced over here, right? And then as long as they can understand that rationale, then you might have a better path forward. And that's where I feel like, again, the communication, before anyone's going to listen to you, you got to listen to their mission first too, right? You got to be able to understand where they're coming from. You can't just say, you need to do it my way or else. So that's where the communication, right? The partnering skills really come in.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much. That's just such great advice. So tell us, you've been on this journey and you're doing new things and you're in touch with your creative side and all everything that you've done in your journey here. So what's next for Mr. Randy Mills?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm very go with the flow, so to speak.
I love it.
I'm very much about the learning and the growing.
Yeah.
Really enjoying, product, just the concepts, the fundamentals behind it, everything from ideation to, developing go-to-market strategies to working with development to launching. I find that world fascinating
It
to me.
is.
And so, for me, it's how can I make a bigger impact within the organization? How can I make a bigger impact, for the people I work with and the company I work for? That's what I'm hoping to achieve right over the next 3, 5, 10 years. I've gone from this sales to a risk AML, background to now I'm in product. Who knows where it's going to take me?
Yeah.
As long as I can actually, continue to help make progress. One thing I've noticed, there's a commonality, Manal, between teams, right? Just people in general. I've led sales teams and the risk teams and the product teams, and people want to feel like they're part of something special. They want to feel like that they're part of something that's going to make a real impact out there in the world, right? Whatever it is. And they want to be able to learn, they want to be able to grow, they want to be able to make mistakes, and it's okay as long as you can, pick up the pieces and keep moving forward from it. Those are all commonalities there. And so for me, I know being in my product role now, I'm learning new things every single day, 10 times a day. And I love it. And then that's going to shape my brain a little differently. And then in the next 3 or 5 years, we'll see what the next steps are. But for right now, I'm super happy. And at the end of the day, it's, how can we build teams to do something fantastic together?
I love it. So, with all this knowledge and broadening of your mind, would you mind sharing with us who are some of your favorites? What do you listen to? What are you reading? Is there something we should be picking
Sure.
up? What are some of your faves here?
Well, Jay Shetty, Think Like a Monk. I know you and I we chatted about that before. That's a big I'm a big fan of that. So it's very much around how do you go from a monkey mind to a monk mind? How do you go from being reactionary to being proactive, right?
Right.
Reducing the noise, all that.
Living in the presence.
Um, exactly, exactly. And then there's another one by Simon Sinek. He's had a couple books, like Why. One I really like is called Leaders Eat Last. And just like the title sounds, it's about, it's very much about that servant leadership
Right.
and, making sure that your teammates are taken care of before you, right? It's a very powerful thing. And it goes back to, being able to remove obstacles, remove noise, right, from their work so they can focus on what they need to do. It actually comes from a principle from like the Marines. I was watching this thing on Simon Sinek a few months back on how he came up with the title, and because they say officers eat last. So in other words, it's their team, right? Their troops that actually eat first, and the officers will eat last.
Wow.
And then what happens is, right, it creates this ecosystem, right, where there's so much tremendous amount of respect, but at the same time, they will do whatever it is for their leader because they know, right, that they're being taken care of. And so it's a fantastic book. I've probably read that thing about 3 or 4 times, and I've actually been reading it again over the past couple weeks. You can see I have a bunch of books behind me. A lot of it's around, not a lot around product management, more so these days, but very much around mindfulness, right? How do you overcome, complicating or challenging scenarios? Because I do feel like your brain is a muscle that you have to exercise. And as long as you feel prepared, right, you're oftentimes going to make better decisions because you're
Right.
going to be in a less stressed out state, so to speak, right? And
Right.
so it's just about education, and you're empowering yourselves so this way you can empower others later.
Yeah, no, I love it. Actually, I just watched a Simon Sinek episode yesterday on LinkedIn that he posted. And he talks about this title of a person called the leadership buddy because he said leaders need sort of this. And Simon, if you're listening to this, if you hear this somewhere, this leadership buddy is exactly what you're explaining that we explain as a force multiplier at Founder and Force Multiplier. But it was a great sort of speech about how leaders at times do also feel a bit separated and lonely. And as they're, whether they're managing or leading a new initiative, making transformation, dealing with change, they sort of forget their own self, right? And he's like, it's important to have
Hmm.
sort of a right hand partner to bring that back because a leader needs to be as motivated to be motivated for the team so the team can be motivated and change can happen collectively, right? And we sort of miss, I feel like we really, the pandemic has really helped us bring back our human side. Like we're not robots, and
Hmm.
we forget that sure there are moments where we, put on our, kind of have rigor and keep everything in the back and don't really focus on the things that are bothering us, but they will always come back if you don't address them or you don't live in the present or try to let go or like you said in Jay Shetty's book and in just Buddhist philosophy altogether, just really understanding that the past has happened in the past and how do you fall forward and the art
Hmm.
of not holding grudges and letting go. And really that's hard. I mean, human that's probably one of the hardest. I know it's easier said than done, but it's really hard. But freeing yourself from
Hmm.
that allows you to create the space to think about how to grow and continue to evolve in the future, which is something that we often miss and have to learn on our own. So thanks for sharing. And these are some great leaders that help us sort of remember that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you. And you bring up a great point, which is, to me, I equate that to like cross mentorship, right? Or cross
Yeah.
mentoring, where, there's been some significant leaders in my life I've worked with that I still stay close to today. And, some of them too. And, they have really built the foundation for what I believe in, right? And I would say they probably make up about 80, 85% of what I stand for today, but they didn't just tell me about it. They actually displayed it. They showed me, right, firsthand. And when you have someone tell you, I'll never be mad at you for making a bad decision. I'll only be mad at you if you can't make a decision. That's a very empowering statement in itself, right?
Very.
And
Wow.
so when you have leaders like this that coach you and will talk to you and really care for you, right? It naturally, not only do you learn from it and you become a better person yourself, but you want to help others too, right? And it's so it's times like that where you just think about your journey, right? Sometimes you're going to take a step back, something's going to happen, you're going to trip and fall. But if you look at where you're at today versus where were you at 5 or 10 years ago, right? In terms of like your knowledge, what you've learned, your understanding of the world, right? The dynamic of, relationship building. You're oftentimes going to be proud of that.
That's awesome. So Randy, I mean, we could talk for hours because it's just so much great content to pick out.
Is there a limit to a podcast? What's the longest
no limit.
podcast?
There's no limit to a podcast.
I'm joking.
Are podcasters that put out 4 to 5 hour podcasts as well, and they dive into deep topics. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
We'll save that for the next one.
I know, right? I know. Are there any closing, parting words, advice that you have for us?
I think it's, believe in yourself first, because before you get anyone else to believe in you, you got to believe in yourself first. Know it's okay to make mistakes. You got to pick yourself back up and keep moving forward. Fail often, fail frequently, but learn from it. Okay. And I just want to end on, I'm super happy for you, Manal, being in this role that you're in now. You've always been super high energy. You've always been super thoughtful with some of your teammates as well, which, we stay close with. And just really glad that you have this platform to make such a big impact, and really excited to see where we're going to take this. So,
thank you.
Very happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And for those who don't know, I came from a very sort of structured corporate setting most of my career, and took a leap of faith about a year ago to do new things and follow my passions. And so, I have to admit, I do miss sometimes, the corporate world. I didn't think I would say this, but, just everybody that you work with, your functional partners, the ability to have large teams to create change, the things that you have to go and be scrappy and go find in a startup that you sort of had. I feel like now I am grateful for that experience, and I am grateful for the people who I came across and things that I don't know about, like, technology and back-end platforms, and just remembering words from leaders when we were working on products and there were complex technology products, and sitting in the same room, like those words are coming back to me, like, oh man, remember when our CTO said this? We should apply X. And you don't realize that every path in your life has a reason, and your experiences create your journey. And you taught us that today. I'm going through that today. And this has been a great discussion. Thank you so much, Randy, for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Manal, and all the success to you guys. And looking forward to some of your future content coming out. So
thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. If you love the show, please leave us a review. It really helps us get the podcast out to the leaders and force multipliers who need it. As you know, we love to share in experiences and grow together. If you are interested in coming on to our podcast or have a guest referral, please email us at info@founderandforcemultiplier.com, and all the information to reach us is linked below in the show notes. Thank you again, and see you next week.